Thank you, ma'am. Go right to the pledge. Mayor, stop. Bill, can you lead us off?
Happy to. Please join me in pledging allegiance to our great republic and the flag it represents. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thanks, Phil. Moving on, item Title III, Title VI Policy and Meeting Procedures. Clerk, would you just read those for me, please?
Sure. CYMPO complies with Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and related non-discrimination statutes and regulations in all programs and activities. Members of the public may review the CYMPO Title VI plan and submit a self-identification survey by accessing the CYMPO website. A reminder to those attending the meeting, please keep your line on mute until you wish to speak. And this meeting is also available for public viewing on the CYMPO YouTube page.
Thank you, ma'am. Move right on to item 4, call to the public. This item is to provide an opportunity for presentation of comments by the public on subjects not on the agenda. Individuals wishing to address the board need not request permission in advance and are limited to 3 minutes. Clerk, has anyone indicated they wish to comment? No.
Not seeing any comments at this time. Oh, I'm sorry. I see one raised hand.
All right, here we go.
Is it Anne Friday? You're on mute.
Oh, hi, I'm Ann Friday. I'm not clear what topic we're on.
We are on the call to the public. Do you have a comment for the board?
I do on the Sundog corridor study.
Okay. I don't believe we have that open for public hearing. You can give the comment now if you'd like, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, Chairman Brown and County Supervisors. I am Ann Friday, resident of Prescott. Thank you for the important work you all do for our county. I was surprised to read a few weeks ago in the Daily Courier that the proposed Sundog Corridor connector, previously projected for the year 2032, has now been elevated to a top priority for this year. An expensive Sundog Corridor study was conducted in 2013. It was met with great objections to it by the Yavapai Hills and Diamond Valley residents. Their comments are included in the 2013 study in Appendix C and include the following statements. This is to reward the developers. It destroys open space and harms our wildlife, uses our water resources. It's a road to nowhere, reduces our property values, doesn't consider the residents. It serves only the purpose of future development and developers. Instead, expand the Highway 69 and time the traffic lights properly. Currently, there are 2 ongoing Highway 69 studies. Why aren't we giving those studies time to first see the effects of the SR 69 widening and safety improvements already in progress, and the adaptive traffic signal study also already underway for Highway 69 and intended to address the traffic congestion? Instead, this new corridor study has been put into the top priority position and for top priority funding without waiting on the outcome of the existing Highway 69 projects. I believe that the proposed Sundog Corridor's Sunrise exit will create a shortcut for motorists heading back and forth to Costco and using both Sunrise Boulevard and Yavapai Hills Boulevard to access Highway 69 at intersections, which will create worse bottlenecks than we already have. It will bring unwanted traffic volumes through our neighborhoods, much like Rosser Road has done to the Rosser residents. And eventually, more commercial development will be occurring between Costco and Diamond Valley along Highway 69. And also, the proposed Sundog Corridor connector preferred route is the one that allows for the most development along the corridor. which will also increase traffic volumes through our neighborhoods. In summary, I believe the 2 Highway 69 projects already underway should be completed first to allow them time to demonstrate their planned congestion relief and reduction in traffic accidents before undertaking a new $400,000 study. If a study update is needed at all at this time, why can't the 2013 study be updated at less cost? And it puzzles me why, when our new mayor-elect and council members who ran on controlled growth, conservation of safe yield of water, and environmental protections, have now accelerated this to a top priority project. And where will the money for the new roadway project come from? The estimated 30 million cost seems way too low to me. Some estimates have placed it up at 90 million, depending on the chosen route for it. Mr. Gallegos, in a recent CYMPO presentation, said the only way ADOT will bring any money to a new roadway project is with the local government bringing their own dollars to the table. This sounds like a potential tax increase of some kind to me. Thank you for allowing me time to speak.
Thank you, ma'am. Allison, do we have anyone else?
No, not at this time.
All right, thank you, ma'am. Moving on to item 5, consideration and possible action to approve the September 15th, 2021 Executive Board regular meeting minutes. Mr. Gallegos.
The minutes are for you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. The minutes are presented to you for your review and comment. If you have any questions, happy to answer.
We've all had a chance to review them in our packet. If there's no questions, I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, I make that motion.
Give a second.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Shows that it passes. Item 6, CYMPO Executive Director Report. Back to you, Mr. Gallegos.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, thank you very much. I just have one report or one update. Would like to thank those of you that were able to attend the Rural Transportation Summit. For those that have been following over the years, it was definitely very different in light of COVID. Last year it was canceled altogether. And then this year was extremely modified, where we had just around a little over 100 people able to attend by invitation only. But the discussion was incredibly valuable. We had several of our board members able to attend. Really the heart of the program this year, again, very streamlined program, but the heart of the program was seeking the opportunity for one-time funding for transportation for Greater Arizona or rural Arizona for about $50 million, and of which CYMPO would receive about $4 million. When Kevin gives his update in a few items ahead, he'll probably talk a little bit more about this, but I would say from my experience at the summit was incredibly effective, was a good use of everyone's time. So if you were able to attend, thank you. Sorry for those that weren't able to, but we made a good showing. We talked about the benefits to our region and for Greater Arizona. So that's all I have on my update. If there's any questions or comments, happy to address them.
All right. Mr. Gallegos, I believe you're still on the floor for mobility management. Item 7, transit update.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. I would like to introduce CYMPO's newest employee. She's in our meeting now. Her name is Kimberly Blanco. She is our transit planner. She comes from the city of Prescott. She was in the planning department there the last couple of years. This is her 4th week on the job. She's hit the ground running. We've had several meetings in the Quad City area. She was able to attend the Yavapai Regional Transit Board meeting here recently. We met with Pedro Rodriguez, the Prescott Valley transit manager, and we've met with several staff members from the city of Prescott. Again, how do we have transit move forward in the Quad City area? How do we provide planning support? What are the opportunities? And then also mobility management. So Kimberly, thank you for joining us. I'll get a chance to hopefully meet everybody at some point in person, but that's really the only update I have. I know the town of Prescott Valley is moving forward. We met yesterday with Pedro. Mayor Palguda, you all have a request for proposals out currently. I understand the deadline on it is the end of November, at which point, and Norm's on the line too. Norm, if I miss a point, help me out with this, but you'll be reviewing the proposals that come in for possibly a turnkey transit service to provide microtransit and or technology services, but I'll call on Norm if I missed a point in that. I feel free to clarify, Norm.
Yeah, Vince, if I'm live, you said it very well. You're right on point. So yes, we're looking forward to receiving proposals on November 30th and moving forward with selection and with the selection committee.
Great. And that's all I have at this time, Mr. Chair. If there's any questions or comments on this item number 7.
Anything out there? If not, moving on. Item 8. Mr. Adam, you're up for our TAC report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Hello, everyone. There's a tremendous amount of activity. And before we get to that priority list legislation, I want to give you a real quick update on what's going on back in Washington. As it stands, we are still one vote away from the bipartisan infrastructure bill passing. We're now, I believe, close to 2 months since a group of 11 Republican and 11 Democrat senators crafted legislation with the support of the president that would provide not only a 5-year reauthorization for all the federal transportation programs, but provide a very significant increase in the funding levels. That's the formula funding that the state receives every year for highways, as well as some of the programs where funding is directed to the COGS and MPOs, such as CYMPO, whether it be SDBG, HSIP, or planning funding. And there would be some very significant increases in those funding levels if this bill were to pass. And in addition, the amount of competitive grant funding that would be available would also substantially increase, not just with the existing grant programs, but there would be numerous new programs created, including one that would be specific to rural infrastructure. So as volatile as Congress has been, I think most stakeholders were very pleasantly surprised that something could move this far along that would be this impactful. But we're one vote away. It appears that the votes are there, but there is a block of legislators that are holding out their support, attempting to use that for leverage to ensure the passage of the Build Back Better legislation, which provides more of the funding to social service type programs. But with that said, I think the support is there once the other bill is resolved. As it stands, the current authorization for transportation programs has now been pushed out till December 3rd. So we've got about a month to work this through, although I would anticipate that as soon as there's enough headway made that the bill could go up, and that could be even as early as later this week. So obviously we'll keep everybody posted there, but that's going to have a major impact on transportation funding levels over the course of not just this upcoming year, but at least 5 years out. And so again, I'll keep you posted on that. As far as the state level is concerned, right now, the revenue collections at the state level are looking great. I think that there's a tremendous amount of potential for one-time funding to get directed to the infrastructure, provided those we stay on course with the economy. And while we'll continue to push for increased revenues on a permanent basis that feed into HERF and then fund ADOT and the local governments. We have also seen that over the last 5 years or so, there's not quite the support to increase the revenue on any sort of permanent basis. However, infrastructure has prioritized to the point to where legislators have been willing to direct one-time funding to the infrastructure, but in the form of earmarks for specific projects for the most part. So we're taking the pragmatic approach this year in that if that's the way they're going to increase the funding, rather than sit on the sidelines and have no input on which projects get funded, as the transportation planning organizations from across the state, we have vetted and prioritized 50 million worth of projects across greater Arizona. And we will be putting forward legislation to earmark that specific list of projects that we have developed. And as Vinny indicated, I think that the summit that we had a couple of weeks ago provided some tremendous momentum for that push. We had 13 legislators that attended, including many of the key ones, including the 2 transportation chairs. And also over the course of the last couple of months, we have had a series of meetings with other legislators. And so I think that so far, I think we've gotten a very favorable response to this concept. And so while there's still a lot of work that needs to be done, as it stands right now, I think we're in about as good of a place as we can be, albeit it's November and we're waiting for this session to start in January. So with that, happy to answer any questions.
Can I ask a couple of questions, Kel?
Yeah, Vice Chair.
Okay, first of all, I wanted to ask Kevin, of the bills that are currently in the Congress looking to move forward with transportation and infrastructure, which bill are you talking about? Is it the 1.7 or what, $8 billion dollars?
The IIJA, which is the bipartisan bill, and that's the one that totals about 1.2 trillion.
I think it's the 3 trillion that everybody's having a problem with.
That's the one that, yes, there's a group of legislators that are holding out their support on the infrastructure bill until they have greater assurances that that larger bill, it was 3.5 trillion. They're now, it appears that negotiations have it down to 1.75 trillion. And yes, they're holding out support for that 1.2 trillion infrastructure bill till they have greater assurances that the other one's going to move forward.
Okay, and the other thing I just wanted to comment in at the conference, I think was really important is the RTAC sat down and did a very comprehensive look at doing some kind of strategic planning. And that's where we came up with some of the realizations of putting some of this forward into one-time funding. The $50 million literally came from those kind of meetings. And that's, I think, has been very effective. And I think we've got a good plan moving forward. Not that we all agree on what the $50 million should be spent on, but
it's certainly better than them just earmarking pet projects.
We have anything else for Kevin? Kevin, nicely done.
Thank you.
Moving on, item 9, discussion and possible action to appoint new representative and alternate to the Rural Transportation Advocacy Council. Positions are effective January 1, 2022. Mr. Gallegos.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. If I can have Allison, can you bring up, and this was just a reference for me, maybe this will help in the discussion. Currently, the representative from CYMPO for RTAC is County Supervisor Chairman Brown, and his alternate is John Hughes, which is 2021. Forgive the informality of this. I just wasn't sure kind of the previous rotation, I was drawing a blank. So Allison just quickly provided kind of what we had done, what the board has chosen to do historically. And again, forgive that we're just using last names, but when you see like Mayor Terry Nolan, that's when he was with Dewey Humboldt, and then Supervisor Brown was his alternate. Previous to that was when Mary Mallory was with the town of Prescott Valley. She served as the representative for 2 years, and Terry Nolan was the alternate. And then Terry Nolan was the rep. But you could look back at kind of, if you will, the representation. And with that said, I'm just happy to turn it over to you, Mr. Chair, if I can answer any questions or comments. But
Sure.
outside of that, it's really your discussion to have.
I think, thank you, Allison, for bringing up this spreadsheet. And I think one of the things that we can all look at is there's really no consistency to this in regards to whether it's 2 years, 1 year, 3 years, multiple years as an alternate. And I think as a board, I think moving forward, I think it would be beneficial for boards in the future, not just our current board, if we establish a baseline. And when I say a baseline, for example, would be currently Vice Chair Brown is our representative with Mayor Hughes as our alternate. We should set something where we as a board should feel comfortable with the vice chair being in that position for 2 consecutive years. At least we know that person is there for 2 years, and then we evolve into something after that. Otherwise, we're going 1 year, 2 year, maybe there's a chance it goes 3 years. And I think it would help kind of spread out perhaps the representation throughout the board. Because CYMPO is supposed to represent, everyone on this side of the mountain. And I think by doing it that way, we'd be able to show better representation. But I'd be welcome to hear your guys' opinions as well.
Well, just as an observation, a lot of this for RTAC had to come down to who was able to attend and or be before. Most of it was before Zoom and all that, these things that we now use. So now we have an availability where most of us can participate, but still it was up to some could not because they hold regular jobs and or things like that and couldn't get away, especially some of the council people that were being appointed by our mayors that are attending. It's difficult to find volunteers as it is. So we wanted to have something that was somewhat stable. So it was whoever basically raised their hand and said they could do it. So we've moved on. I don't know where we are from now because we're seem to be more active, and there's probably going into this new legislative season, it's going to be very, very busy, especially with $50 million on the table.
That's true. And Vinny, just confirming, there's no set in stone policy that's written in regards to how this goes. Technically, someone could run it for 5 years if the board allowed it, correct?
Mr. Chair, members of the board, exactly. And I think this goes to Supervisor Brown's point, Craig and I have been around in many of these discussions, and I think it did come down to exactly what he said, logistics in the past. With Mayor Nolan in the past, he was available, generously. Supervisor Brown's been available. So there is no policy in place at this time as to a rotation and how the representation works. It's really your call, and what factored into that is what Supervisor Brown said is availability has been a major factor.
I think accepting the position or accepting being nominated for the position, that person should understand what goes into it details wise. And like Craig said, now with Zoom, it makes it, heck, you could be sitting on the highway in traffic and going to a Zoom meeting on your phone now. So I think logistically that makes it a lot easier and it opens up our options. And I just think moving forward, not just for now, but for 10 years from now, the new board would be able to look back and be like, it's probably better we have someone in that position for 2 years. On their second year, they're in the groove of how things are going, and then moving on from there. But I'm open to what you guys think on that. Gary, looks like you might have a comment.
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you. I just think, and I agree with Supervisor Brown, you need people that are going to be available to do to fill the position and attend the meetings, you also need to make sure that whoever is appointed by the board is somebody that has at least been on the board long enough to have some experience as to what RTAC does and as to what CYMPO does and what his role will be, and have the knowledge and experience to carry out the position.
And I think
It's really, in being a representative of these different things, is you're more of a messenger than anything else.
sure.
You're bringing back information. We're lucky enough that we have, RTAC's boss bringing everything back to us, and it's nice that Kevin does that, but not everybody is able to do that across the state. So it's a win-win for us, but not for everybody necessarily. I'm really troubled, to be honest with you right now, is with the lack of participation from Chino Valley, and I'm gonna have a talk with their mayor probably in the next week or so in regards to this. We need to have somebody here on a regular basis. Now, I know Mr. Armstrong has been ill because he's had COVID, and so is his wife. And so therefore, there's some interesting issues with that, but we need people to participate just so we have accountability in all of the different things that we are participating in.
Vinny, who's their alternative for Chino?
Allison, if you could help me with that. And then if I can, Mr. Chair, Councilman Good does have a comment or a question, but before that, to Supervisor Brown's point, I'm looking at the list. Chino Valley, has not participated. I know you're mentioning, Craig, for this meeting, I understand, but they haven't participated in the RTAC, and then I don't believe they've participated in the chair and the vice chair of this group either, just as a note. But
And they've just had a council that's changed totally practically, so a lot of downtime for that.
yeah, Allison, do you have the alternate list for Councilman Armstrong?
So at this point, there is no alternate since Councilmember Mendoza resigned.
Phil Good has a question or comment.
Phil.
Thanks, Kel. I agree that I think having some continuity is valuable. We also have to look at not only what Chairman Brown said regarding the availability to be able to participate. Having these Zoom meeting options, I think, has been helpful overall, rather than having to trek down to the legislature. But I think that will continue to be necessary. When you look at the description, this is a position where there's going to be some advocacy for rural transportation. So being able to be at the legislature to advocate for some of our rural projects, I think, is necessary for that representative. And then you also have to look at what the terms of those representatives are. I think almost everybody within the elected field here is a 4-year term, except for the mayor of Prescott. So that should generate some, again, continuity. And I think that's probably how we need to do it. Having a good handle on transportation issues is not a quick study. It takes a lot of time to get your arms around it and then be able to not only advocate for it at the legislature, but also be able to understand how best to report it back to the executive committee. So I think your suggestions are good ones, and we probably need to have a little more consistent representation so that we have the choice to be able to get people to be willing to be nominated. Otherwise, we have to nominate and vote somebody in who's not here.
Exactly. No, very well said, sir.
Yeah.
Anyone have anything else to add to this? If not, I'd like to make a motion that we keep it, because what it looks like is Vice Chair Brown, you've been in this for 1 year, with Mayor Hughes as the alternate for 1 year. I'd like to make the motion that we continue this for a second year as it remains.
I'll second that.
All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed? All right. Moving on, item 10, call to the public for comment on the draft 2022 to 2026 Metropolitan Transportation Improvement Program. Let the record show it's open to the public at this moment. And Allison, do we have anyone?
This time, I'm not seeing any raised hands or messages in the chat box.
Mr. Gallegos, you want to add anything at this point, or should I just close the public hearing?
Mr. Chair, the only thing I would add is that items 10 and 11 go together. You'll formally make an action on the next item, but it does relate to the public hearing, but that's the only, I can offer my other comments in item 11.
Okay, so at this moment, I'll close the public hearing and we'll move on to item 11, review, discussion, and possible action to approve the FY 22 to 26 Metropolitan Transportation Improvement Program. Mr. Gallegos.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. You all have already reviewed and approved the Transportation Improvement Program. What you approved is for it to go out for public comment. It is required that it go out for public comment for 30 days at a minimum. We have, in order to give the most opportunities for engagement, we went ahead and, as you just had the public hearing on the last item, today, I believe, would bring it up to about 45 days. So it's been available for public review and comment from your last executive board meeting. Again, the TAC has worked with staff. They have endorsed and recommended it on to you for your approval. I would like to note just a couple minor changes that we made since you've last seen it. Daniel, if you could bring that up on the screen. The only changes that have been made is one that is related to, let's see, what are you showing me here, Daniel or Allison?
That's page 21.
Sorry about that. I couldn't unmute. This is for the Sundog connector name change, Vinny.
Thank you. So, and this item will be next item on the agenda is we'll be talking about the Sundog connector design concept report. The title is going to need to change, and I'm going to explain that in the next item. It's going to need to be identified as a feasibility study. So we've identified it in here as the Sundog connector design concept report and environmental overview. So we just need to change the title. Again, I'll explain that on the next item. And then the only other change we have is on the transit page. You can bring that up, Daniel.
Vinny, can I ask you a question?
Yes, sir.
Point. Shouldn't item 12 be before item 11, actually?
And that's the choice of you and the other board members, if you'd like to. We didn't receive until just last minute that there was going to be a name change, so forgive the order of agenda items, but Supervisor Brown, if you want to, after I'm done, table this until item 12, you're more than welcome to. If that
Well, I'm just throwing it out to the entire group. It just seems before we approve the expenditures, we ought to have the discussion if in fact that's where we want to go for this, professional services agreement, and and then go ahead and approve the plan that we are sending to them. If we say no to either one of these, it stops the whole process.
Which is a fair point, sir. What I would say is the expenditures have already, if you will, been approved. What we were trying to change is just the name of it, so some of the logistics, but if you want to table that until after item 12, you're more than welcome to, if that's a better order.
I agree with that assessment with Chairman Brown.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we actually don't need to table it. We just need to do item 12 first,
Right.
and then approve the amended, which now is 11. Move it to 12, and we would approve it as amended.
Yes, Mr. Gallegos, if you just want to continue with your presentation for item 12, and then we'll call for motions in a different order.
That's fine. Let's go to item number 12. Mr. Chair, do you want to read the item?
Yes, it'll be review, discussion, and possible action to approve the advertising of the request for proposal, RFP, and professional service agreement for the Sundog Connector Design Concept Report and Environmental Overview Project.
Mr. Chair, members of the board, if I can jump in before Daniel, I'll give Daniel a moment here. What I'm going to ask you at the end of this presentation actually is you go ahead and table this item. And the reason for that is we just received some additional feedback from Arizona Department of Transportations and the Federal Highway Administration. And that information is very pertinent to this project. We need to avoid a 10-year federal construction clock to this project. As we've discussed before, there are no monies secured for the construction of this project. As we've discussed from a planning standpoint, we are trying to continue to evaluate, look at the feasibility of this Sundog connector. From the big picture standpoint, I believe we've gained regional support to make this happen. And looking at the next couple action steps, we are approaching this from a planning standpoint. With that said, if we were to move forward with the design concept report that you have in your packet, and using federal dollars, it would start a 10-year construction clock where this road would need to be constructed within 10 years. And if it's not constructed, then CYMPO would owe the money back to the federal government after the 10 years. So in order to avoid that, we have received information from Federal Highways and ADOT that says a couple changes should be made to the design concept report. Number one, don't call it a design concept report. Number two, call it a feasibility study, which is what I am proposing we move forward with. There's a couple other minor changes, and I'm going to have Daniel walk you through that. But because of these recommended changes, what I would like to do after Daniel presents the scope to you, after you ask some questions, make comments, is I would recommend to you to go ahead and table this item, allow staff to take it back to the TAC for their meeting in December, and then allow us to bring this scope back to you in December to allow it to be advertised. The last comment I want to give to you again is to really recognize the efforts that we're looking at doing is the feasibility work will take place over the calendar year 2022. After that, if we continue to move forward, and there'll be several public meetings, opportunities within that scope in working with a consultant and working with you all and the greater community, there will be plenty of opportunities to engage. I know the 2013 study has been referenced. In that 2013 study, there was 2 public meetings. We would hope to, again, have at least 2 or if not more public meetings to engage the public, but I want to be clear on a couple points. There are no construction monies secured at this point. At the strategic retreat in our discussions, the priority was given to try and get this corridor, this connector, in the best possible position for the future to move forward, and trying to for CYMPO to work on a feasibility study puts this in a position to be able to move forward. If that is successful moving forward, I would offer a note that after that, the design of the project needs to take place. I don't want to jump too far ahead, but that could take a significant part of another year. So if this were all to come together before anything breaks ground, you're looking at still years away. With all that said, I'm hopeful of the success of this moving forward, but at the same time, I do not want to start a 10-year construction clock commitment in light of our situation. So with that said, what I would like to do is have Daniel now walk you through some of the key areas of the scope so that you're familiar with it. We can answer questions, but then, Mr. Chair, I would ask you then after that to table it until next month. So Daniel, can you walk the board through some of the key parts of the scope for this project, please?
Yes, thank you, Vinny. Obviously, the key point of the feasibility study is to assess the alternatives of the previous study from the 2013 PARA study, and either confirm the previous alternatives or any new relevant alternatives as well. Looking at bicycle and pedestrian connections as well as transit, looking at the wildlife corridors. And as Vinny mentioned, the majority of the changes that we have been discussing with ADOT and federal highways are to ensure that we do not start the 10-year design construction timeline. And all of those have to do with preliminary engineering and scoping and design. So going through with like the survey, the design survey needed to be removed. Anything highlighted in blue with the geotechnical report or throughout the rest of the scope of work are just slight adjustments to language or minor additions. So conceptual engineering needed to be removed from the geotechnical report. Drainage needed to be removed completely. That's something that you would do with a design concept report, but with the engineering and the 15% designs and us changing this to a feasibility report, this needed to be removed. There were slight language changes to right-of-way. 2 things were removed and 2 things added. Same thing with utilities. As Vinny mentioned, we really want to make sure that public outreach and engagement is going to be a key part of this feasibility study and making sure that we are engaged with all those involved in the study area. Environmental overview, making sure for wildlife corridors and things like that. The engineering scoping design need to be removed and changed to a conceptual plans. In the estimated cost, we did remove design or engineering design out of that cost. The deliverables, design and construction and preliminary design need to be removed. Environmental overview needed to be part of the actual feasibility study and not a standalone report. The drainage report has been removed. And that's about it for the changes to the scope that from what you have in your agenda packet.
Thank you, Daniel. So, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, with those comments in hand, the TAC has already reviewed the scope and has recommended it on to you for review. They were aware that we were pending some feedback. Well, we received the feedback, which is what I'm going over with you. Due to what I'm considering a little more substantial recommended changes from federal highways and ADOT, again, this is where I'm asking that you all go ahead and table it, allow me to take it back to the TAC, have their review, so that they can make their recommendation on to you with these changes in mind. I will close by saying that we do have TAC members present. The last meeting, Norm Davis, the vice chair, filled in for our chair, Frank Marbury. He's present. I believe Dan Cherry and maybe some other TAC members are present. So with all that said, I'm happy to now answer questions and comments. And Daniel, you can take this off the screen for now.
I have a couple of questions, Vinny. Pal, if you don't mind.
Absolutely, all yours.
Okay, one, we're going from a requested to actually have an improvement plan that is rather specific. Now we are going into something that's rather vague. Will that have an effect on us later on down the road where we're going to have to do this twice?
Mr. Chair, Supervisor Brown and board members, a really good question. No, the simple answer is no, sir. And the work that we've been doing has been, to your point, and this comes out of the strategic retreat. Remember when we brought in Kate Bondi and Dylan Kennedy from AECOM, we really want to be efficient in moving forward. We discussed what your priorities are for the next 5 years. You all identified that Sundog Connector in year 1 would be the ideal #1 project. So with those marching orders in place, we believe that now a feasibility study with what Daniel attempted to start to outline is basically setting us up to now start drilling down into the specifics. So, sir, I don't feel we are going to be duplicating anything in the future. We're just trying to find out, as Daniel mentioned, the potential exact location and then the other issues that relate to it. So I hope that answers your question. If not, I'm happy to.
Well, it does partially. I don't know if it answers it satisfactorily. It does answer the question. However, the next question I would have is that in the MTIP, we've identified $400,000 moving forward to pay for something. that now is only conceptual. It's not, hard and fast, basically, And so I'm wondering, will we have to allocate that entire amount of money?
Mr. Chair, Supervisor Brown, members of the board. So I have reached out to ADOT in the work that they're doing, and that's a really good question, because I asked that question. That was my first question, kind of. Supervisor Brown, maybe I saw a glimmer to save some dollars in rearranging what we're doing. The recommendation, at least from ADOT staff in their experience, sir, was to keep the dollar amount where we're at. We're swapping some things out, but we're also putting some things in. Again, every effort we're doing now is to avoid the 10-year construction clock, but we were able to add a few things in there. So you're more than welcome to direct us to reevaluate the dollar amount, and we can have that discussion with the TAC. I will tell you, I asked the question and they strongly recommend for us to leave the dollar amount where we're at. They feel that kind of given our scope and what we're looking at, that would be about the right amount.
The one good thing about, and this is more a statement or an observation than anything else, the one good thing about the 10-year window is that it gives you tells you got to get moving. You can't sit on your butt and let it just slide by for a number of years. You have to move forward. And with that onus that comes with the federal money, that is a good thing to have when it comes to working with ADOT in picking out a specific project. Let's say 69, Highway 69, 6 lanes all the way through. That is a project that we all want to push through, but we don't have any onus for the money to get to there. So that's why we're going to a planning stage on the Sundog connector, if I'm not mistaken. Now, if I misspoken, please correct me.
Mr. Chair and Supervisor Brown, members of the board, that's absolutely a perspective. I definitely could have kept it as it was and brought it to you and made the recommendation along Supervisor Brown's points. I'm doing the best I can, I guess, if I can in the region, to read the tea leaves, and kind of looking at some of the conversation, I felt more conservative to bring to you a change and not start that 10-year clock. Again, where I'm seeing Supervisor Brown is that, our discussions are really looking at delivering this road, obviously under 10 years, but I don't know that I want to put someone in the place 10 years from now and say it didn't happen and now CYMPO has to pay it back. So moving forward, you all can take the action you so choose, but at this time I'm recommending let's not.
I have a comment.
Yes, sir.
Before we move forward. I agree, this should be much more of a feasibility study than a actual vote on moving forward for construction. I believe the limited amount of information that we were given when we indicated what our preferences were for those 4 or 5 different potential routes. There needed to be much more information, and I think we'll get that from this feasibility study to determine which is the best overall and not necessarily the least cost. And we don't even know until this feasibility is done what the potential total cost would be for alternate routes. I've been trying to engage some of the community members, which we heard from one today. There are concerns in that area that somehow this is a predetermined decision, and I want to make sure that that's not the truth of the matter. I think it's important that when you look at the scope of the initial proposal, there's a lot of information in here that I think we really need to have and consider before we select a route and then move forward with planning and construction, because this is a major corridor that we're developing, and we need to make sure that we consider all of those costs and impacts before we vote to proceed. And then trying to get this thing funded, designed, built, and completed within 10 years is, in my opinion, a pretty daunting task. So I would agree that moving it to a feasibility instead of a actual design is much more important for us to make the right kind of decision that we can justify in all of the communities that are going to be impacted.
All right, thank you, sir. So Vinny, are we looking at just, I need a motion just to remove item 12 at this time.
Yes, sir. I'm going to take it back to the TAC, and I want them to continue to review it. And we would have a December meeting. I know I had given you a forecast that this would be your last meeting of the year, but in light of this particular topic and Councilmember Good and Supervisor Brown's comments and others, it will be ideal to have a December meeting and let the TAC review this one more time, give their recommendations to you. And then I would come back to you in December and ask for your review and tentative approval at this time.
So basically what we're saying is, and let me get this straight, is basically changing the word to feasibility, correct?
Supervisor, it starts with the title. The title is the number one thing, but as Daniel listed, those noted changes, if you remember, he had some things in blue and things crossed out. Those are the changes since you received the packet that we've received back from Federal Highways and ADOT. Again, those are the changes that need to take place to not start the 10-year clock. So the title and
we're going to think about this for another 30 days or so and talk about it in December again.
Exactly.
So I think that we'd all have a chance to review and what we're seeing and think about what we want to actually occur at that December meeting.
Yes, sir.
All right, I'll take a motion at this time then to remove item 12 for further discussion.
So moved.
Second,
Second.
all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? No. All right. And then we'll move back to item 11. Mr. Arias, is that your recommendation at this point?
Yes, sir. Thanks, Mr. Chair, members of the board. So let me, I guess, make this statement so we don't get too stuck on this one item. The tip has the project and the dollar amount, but you have the authority to amend it. So I don't want to get stuck, I guess, in I would prefer to go ahead and rename it. I'm just trying to remove some steps. That there's the name of it is a design concept report. I'm guessing at this point that at a minimum that will change into a feasibility study based on the discussions I'm hearing. So I just want to update the language and not have to keep bringing back amendments over and over again. With that said, though, we can easily bring back an amendment anytime. So if there is a change, so be it. Just trying to reduce the amount of changes. So,
well, for those of you who are looking for it, it's on page 39 down towards the left, fifth from the bottom entry. So,
if you could pull that back up on the screen, please.
Sundog connector design concept report and environmental overview. I think somewhere you're going to throw that word feasibility in there. Am I right, Vinny?
Supervisor Brown, exactly. We would just rename it at this point again, as a tentative expectation that at a minimum, it's going to be called something different. So that would be my recommendation, is to let's go ahead and update this now and call it a feasibility study and environmental overview. And then the other change, Daniel, if you can go down to the transit page, this is the only other change. And this was received from the town of Prescott Valley recommendation, and I agree with it. Norm had recommended, because the CARES Act funds for transit, we do need to make documentation of those funds that, again, remember Prescott and Prescott Valley are receiving 1.2 million a year. And then there's also the 300 million one-time funding. So we just are documenting that essentially in the tip. I think before I had it grouped up in 1 year, but in theory it should be spread out. So this is how it's reflected in the transit plan. With that said, Mr. Chair, these are the only changes that have taken place since you approved it for public comment 45 days ago. Happy to take questions and comments. And now I see that Norm has his hand up, Mr. Chair.
Norm?
Benny, we talked about that Highway 69 mill and fill is an important project. It's already been funded through the legislature. And we talked about that the sheet number 40 might be a good opportunity to note that because we've got the pending noted there, but would that be a good place to note that project so we can track it and, show public attention to it?
Daniel, can you bring up page 40 so we could see what Norm's referencing? Just for, so to get everyone on the same page, the page 40. Is this the page you're talking about, Norm?
Right, Vincent. We had some dialogue email that you said, you don't want to confuse things with the board, but we're making changes now. It might seem prudent that this project's funded. It's $4.7 million that's on a timeline to be delivered in our region. And I'd really think it needs to be noted in our public roadway document. These are pending projects that we don't even have funded yet. I'd like to think there's a slot for it.
So, yeah, so Mr. Chair, members of the board, Norm emailed me and asked if we would include this in the changes. I didn't want to cause confusion, but in light of his comment, it would be for your consideration. Norm's recommendation is that the monies that Representative Quan Nguyen was able to secure for State Route 69 through Prescott Valley, the 4.7 million of the mill and fill project, this would be a good place to note that. Just for clarification, the tip is to identify the federal funding, federally funded related projects. So my response to Norm was, technically, we do not need to put that project in the tip, but we do have other local projects in the tip that are not required to be there to show the comprehensive work of the region and the various projects. So I have no opposition to including it, but that would be up to you, Mr. Chair and members of the board, if you would like the $4.7 million of state general funds for the 69 project. We'd be happy to include it with your motion today, Mr. Chair.
I don't think it hurts us. I agree with Norm. It's just listed in there. If we're listing other items that not necessarily fall under that category, I think it doesn't hurt to show a win for our area in that packet.
I agree with Cal.
All right, so
Yep.
if there's nothing else, if we can just get a motion to approve for item 11 with the annotation of Norm Davis's comment. And Vinny, if you can get that specifically in there.
I make a motion to approve with the amendment.
Can I get a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? All right. So now moving on, item 13, review, discussion, and possible action to approve the ADOT safety performance targets in perpetuity. Daniel?
Yes, thank you very much. The safety targets that are up on your screen right now, they're set by ADOT and updated yearly. They're data-driven and realistic and are intended to keep the state focused on improving safety. MPOs have the option of either supporting the state targets or establishing their own targets. ADOT does recommend that MPOs support the ADOT safety performance targets. If an MPO does choose to establish their own, the established targets are not included in the assessment of whether a state has met or made significant progress towards meeting its targets. These targets are assessed and adjusted annually in Arizona's Highway Safety Improvement Program, HSIP. CYMPO is also pursuing HSIP funds in the next round of funding for fiscal years 25 and 26. Today, we will be looking for a motion to adopt the ADOT safety performance targets in perpetuity.
Mr. Chair, I'd move to adopt them.
Can I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed? Moving on, item 14, discussion and possible action to hold election of officers for executive board chair, vice chair, and secretary treasurer. Positions are effective January 1, 2022. And I think we can kind of piggyback this onto our discussion we had for item 9 earlier in regards to creating a sense of continuity moving forward with board members. And I'd like to hear your opinion in regards to that. And I also, at this point, like to bring up the discussion in the past, or as of this past year, we've been mainly, I think, 100% on Zoom. What are your thoughts of bringing back in person at a rotational basis throughout our area? So basically, Dewey, Humboldt 1, Prescott Valley, the county, Prescott, Chino Valley, and then a Zoom with the Zoom option for all of them. I'd like to hear what you guys have to say about that, if that's a possibility. If it's something you want to stick with Zoom, we can do that. I just think it helps to show that we are basically spreading the love through all of our communities and representing each community equally.
You know, I'd agree with you, Pell. I think that would be a great idea, except I want to make sure everybody has the availability of having a Zoom type meeting that is open to the public. That is the hard part.
And that's what I think we should, I think we, between now and January, I think we go back to our divisions and see if that is a possibility on all ends. But I think it should be fair and definitely make it for the public so they can reach out either via Zoom or at least on a speaker as a possibility. So
yeah, I'm not sure that Chino Valley has the ability to Zoom out to the public for public comment. That's why I'm wondering about that one. And I don't know, John, maybe you can answer that for your chambers over there.
John?
We're trying that. Actually, you were trying that actually this afternoon. So we upgraded, but we want to make sure it works. But I'm for it if it'll pan out.
All right. Phil, your thoughts?
Well, quite frankly, I'm not a big Zoom fan as in general. I find that the quality of discussions are much less impactful than in-person meetings, and being overly reliant on one particular type of technology, I think, is somewhat dangerous. But let's face facts. There's a lot of people that want to be informed, that want to participate, or at least listen in and be included in the discussions. And right now, it seems to be the best format that we have to use. But let's keep in mind that that doesn't mean it's going to be guaranteed and etched in stone. So generally, I think I agree with your comments with those types of kind of caveats.
And I think moving forward, if maybe Allison, if you could reach out to each municipality and see, get a one-on-one on what, if it is capable or not, and then basically we can maybe report back in December or January and then see where we are from there moving forward.
Absolutely.
Mr. Chair, this is Board Member Knight.
Yes, sir.
I agree. I think I think we need to have a hybrid meeting so that they can be in person, but we have the Zoom option. Quite frankly, it's a little tough for me to sometimes juggle my schedule around and travel all the way to where I need to be to the meeting in person.
Oh, absolutely. I totally understand that, sir.
And I do agree with Supervisor Brown. One thing that we've found with the State Transportation Board is we can't always have our board meetings where we wanted to have them because those particular places don't have the ability to do a WebEx or a Zoom meeting. So we have to be very careful about where we choose to have the meeting so that it can be open to the public, at least by WebEx or Zoom or whatever the virtual medium happens to be. So that's one thing. Yeah, we really have to look at to see if each one of the entities is capable of doing a virtual meeting so that everybody can be included.
And I think if there's an exception, then we don't have to cancel the traveling roadshow to say if just because one municipality can't do it. We can just work our way around that. And if we just go back and forth from a Dewey, Prescott County, Prescott Valley type, that's at least we're trying there.
I have a comment.
Yes, sir.
Hey, in the past, we've actually forwarded, like Prescott Valley helped us one time when we didn't have the internet down there. So we could probably do that at the same time. Again, if everybody wants to participate, I'm all for it.
Okay. So that's just a thought. I think moving forward, we kind of iron this out a little bit. But back to item 14 in regards to the election of officers. If we are all in agreement with how we handled number 9, we can handle it the same way for item 14 moving forward, and that would be Mayor-elect Good as treasurer, secretary, Supervisor Brown as vice chair, and myself as current chair for 1 additional year.
Mr. Chair, I would make that motion.
All right, sir. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All right. Moving on, item 15, discussion and possible action to approve the 2022 executive board meeting schedule. Mr. Gallegos.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. On any given year, on average of 8 to 9 meetings are taking place. But I do find with all of your busy schedules, it is easier to schedule things ahead of time and cancel them after the fact. So with that said, we do have the meeting scheduled the third Wednesday of each month, 3 p.m. You see the 12 months. I really work hard with staff to try and make them as efficient as possible. I don't want you to gather when we can move things to another meeting. So you will get some cancellations. And again, my goal is fewer meetings, more efficient meetings. So I'm always working on that. But with that said, you have the calendar if you have any questions or comments.
Just one comment. Why don't we try and look at December 21st and change that to the 14th?
Great idea, sir. I'm with you. Thank you for catching that.
And also if we can, where you have identified as location of meeting, that's to be determined.
Yes, sir. We can make that change too.
Aside from that, I don't see any challenges or other concerns with this. We're all good with the 3 o'clock?
Yeah, I think that works pretty well.
Yes.
Okay,
The only
great.
comment I would make is the third Wednesday, and that's fine. I mean, but it makes it imperative. The third Wednesday of every month is also coincides with the city council meeting that I need to attend here in Yuma. So the time is fine, the date is fine, but it will mean that I have to attend the meeting virtually. I can't travel and and still be back here for my city council meeting the same time or the same day.
I feel like that's a ridiculous excuse, Gary. What do you mean you can't?
I haven't learned to fly.
Fair enough.
How come you got that jet behind your head?
Well, that's for looks. They haven't offered to give me a ride yet, but I keep hoping.
All right. Well, in the event that you don't get any rides, we understand why you may not be there in person.
And historically, Kel, just going back a number of years, is that we've changed the time to 3 o'clock because 5 o'clock people were going home and then having to come back to work or something to that effect. And now that we have Gary that's coming all the way from Yuma and we're talking about doing some type of communication at our meetings that is remote, then I think we're better to keep it at 3 o'clock because we have our board meeting on the third Wednesday of the month. And sometimes they go over, and if they're any earlier than 3, there's a chance of a conflict.
Right.
No, I think 3 is a good time. Works well. Works well for staff as well.
Again, what was that change on the December date?
From the 21st to the 14th.
14th, okay.
So with that being said, with those changes noted, can we get a motion?
So moved.
Second. All in
I
favor, say
second.
aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Moving on, item 16, ADOT Northwest District Report. Mr. Steinberger, floor is yours.
Good Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and Board. Just a quick update. On the SR 69 widening project, we're currently working on appraisals for the project for the right-of-way TCEs. That should be completed in December. Then we'll be moving on to making offers to property owners in January. That should be completed in February. After that is completed, we're looking at a fiscal year 23 first quarter advertisement. The pavement preservation, the legislative funding from Truwood, the Stone Ridge, we're looking at administering that for the design and the construction by ADOT. We'll be doing that internally with ADOT staff. And we're having the kickoff meeting on Monday, November 8th for that project. For the SR 69, 169 roundabouts, we're getting the funding in place and working on getting the solicitation to bring a designer on board for that project. And then for the Road 1 North over in Chino Valley, we should be wrapping up the construction of that project this week with energizing the signal.
I thought it was supposed to be last night.
Well, it could be up. I haven't double checked yet. So.
Anything else, Todd?
Nope, that's everything, Chairman.
Awesome, sir. Thank you. Any questions for Todd? All right, moving on. Item 17, State Transportation Board Report. Mr. Knight, floor is yours.
Thank you. The last transportation board meeting, well, the last one was a study session, which we didn't approve anything. But at the one before that, which was October 15th, at that transportation board meeting, there were 2 items on that agenda that pertain to Yavapai County. The board approved I-17 Anthem Way to McGuireville Rest Area for $20.6 million. And we also approved SR 89A, a new project, Main Street to River Avenue, pavement rehab for $410,000. And those were the only 2 items on that particular agenda that pertain to Yavapai. So unless somebody has questions, that concludes my report.
What was the 89A? Which project was that, Gary?
That was Main Street to River Avenue, and it's a pavement rehabilitation.
Where is that?
I'm just reading it off. That's just off the agenda the agenda item that they gave us for approval, and we approved it. So Main Street to River Avenue, I'm not familiar with that area, so I can't tell you.
Well, I'm not either. I'm not sure where that's at. Is that somewhere over in the Sedona area, Cottonwood, or I don't know. Todd, do you know?
I believe that is a local project for the town of Jerome. I'll double check and get back with the board.
Okay, that makes sense.
I think they did have a little map. If you look in the at the agenda for October 15th for the State Transportation Board, that item is 6 something. I don't remember whether it was 6A, B, but it was. They have a small map shown there that indicates where that segment on 89A is located.
All right.
Gary, can I ask you again where the 20.6 million on Anthem Way to where?
That's for the Anthem Way to McGuireville Rest Area.
I-17.
Right.
I-17.
Anything else for Gary? All right, thanks, Gary. Item 18, future items for agenda. As always, we don't need to discuss them now, but just get with Allison and make sure we get them on the agenda. I'm sure, Allison, what's the time frame you want them before the scheduled meeting?
We aim to have the agendas out 1 week prior to the meeting.
All right, so hopefully 10 days prior to the meeting, you get with Allison if you want to add an item. If there's nothing else,
Move to adjourn.
second, all in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys. Have a great night.
Thank
Thanks.
you all. Bye.
See you later.